So good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Gloria Neto, the Director of the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies at the National Open University of Nigeria, Abuja. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the National Open University of Nigeria, Professor Olufemi Peters, I welcome you all to the first symposium of our great center for the year 2022. The first symposium was held in November 2021. So this is the very first one for the year, and this brings to two symposia in 7 months. We shall be having a series of symposia on this platform. Our center, the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies, CEMGS, was founded in February 2020 with seed fund from Tech Fund under the administration of the immediate past Vice Chancellor, Professor Abdallah Uba Adamu, who is one of the speakers for today's symposium. You can see that it's the right choice that we have such an eminent personality here to speak with us today. The center is a research hub with emphasis on field-based research that impacts policy formulation and execution for solutions to both internal and global migration. We focus on internal capacity building first and foremost, and stress Afrocentric-based methods in arts, humanities, social sciences, and science. It is the first of its kind in Nigeria and an innovation with distinct concepts, context, perspective, and focus. Please, you are encouraged to visit our site for more information. And this site link will be placed on this chat box right away. So Mrs. Blessing, please, can you put the link to our website on this platform? The link to the website is there on the chat box. So we shall be looking at it for anyone who wants to log in and see what is happening there. The theme for today's symposium is Dissecting the National Migration Policy of Nigeria 2015, the Way Forward. The policy paper being examined is that of 2015, which is still the latest policy paper in Nigeria. I guess that review plans are ongoing concerning this policy paper. 3 eminent speakers, like I have already indicated, have been carefully selected to dissect this topic, because remember we say it's dissecting the national migration policy. So 3 speakers are going to dissect this topic, which is very timely to our own country at this point in time. 3 sub-themes are to be discussed. The first one is Nigeria migration dynamics, trends and patterns, internal and external. The second one is rationale for national policy of migration. And lastly, policy goals, objectives, and strategies. So quickly, I will just take the brief profile of 3 speakers. However, it is important that we have not seen the 3rd speaker online. The only lady amongst them, and it is through email we'll be communicating. Mobile phone, but we hope she will log in later because she's quite aware of this. However, if we fail to see her online, so the 3rd speaker will become the 2nd speaker, and we'll take it that way. So let me quickly tell us briefly about this speaker so that we don't need to be going through their profile again. They just be coming in one after the other, because I know that internet is not too friendly generally these days, but we know that today will be an exception. We pray for a better outing. Let me start with the first speaker for today, Professor Abdallah Uba Adamu. He's a professor of science education, has been that since 1997. This is 3 decades almost. So it's as a chronic professor. a long-standing professor, don't mind my language, professor of media and cultural communication since 2012, all from Bayero University, Kano. He is in the Department of Information and Media Studies, Bayero University, Kano, Nigeria. He was a Fulbright African Senior Research Scholar at the University of California, Berkeley. He subsequently served as visiting professor at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, University of Florida, Gainesville, the State University of New Jersey, Columbia University, New York University of Basel, Switzerland, Freie University Berlin, Universitat Harburg, Universitat zu Köln, Humboldt University zu Berlin, and the Gutenberg Universitat Mainz, all in Germany. Our professor is a super international scholar. In 2012, he was appointed European Union visiting professor for the Modern University project at the Department of African Languages and Cultures, University of Warsaw, Poland, from 1st March to 31st May. He has served as an external examiner at Andhra University, Andhra Pradesh, India, University of Warsaw in Poland, and University of Cologne and Humboldt University, both in Germany. He was admitted as honorary fellow of the Commonwealth of Learning in 2019 by Commonwealth of Learning Canada. From 2016 to 2021, he was the Vice Chancellor of the National Open University of Nigeria, Abuja, the best of all the academic activities. You must agree with me that Professor Abdallah has an enviable CV and is a very well accomplished scholar. Today, he will be speaking on Nigeria migration dynamics, trends, and patterns, both for internal and external migration. Let me quickly take the second speaker. Like I said, I'll take all three of them. Dr. Hawa Madi, that we are still expecting online. Hawa Madi was born in Nigeria and has been a researcher on gender and women for decades. She obtained her bachelor's and master's degrees at the Department of History, Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria, where she worked until 1990. She obtained her PhD at the Department of History, Gothenburg University, Sweden, in 2006. She has been teaching African history at the Center for African Studies, Gothenburg, since 2000. She has also been teaching courses on gender theories and practices, as well as human rights. Both her master's and PhD theses were on gender and women. She was a coordinator of Gender and Development Network, Sweden, 2006 to 2009. While in Nigeria, she was active in the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, and also a founding and steering committee member of Women in Nigeria, WIN, 1982 to 1988. She is currently a senior lecturer stroke researcher at the School of Global Studies, Gothenburg, in Sweden. Her selected publications, current publications, very germane ones are, in 2015, she wrote on strategic silences, theorizing 19th century slavery and sexual desire in the Central Sudan, Forum for Public Policy, volume number 2, 2015. In 2013, Invoking Hijab, the Power Politics of Spaces and Employment in Nigeria, Elisha P. Rene, editor, Berlin, Countervailing in Africa, Bloomington, and Indianapolis, Indiana University Press. And another one is, was in 2012, Lane, Linda, and Maddie, Fanon Revised Race, Gender, and Coloniality, Ron Hall editor, melanin millennium, skin color as 21st century international discourse. This is published by Springer. She is undoubtedly an erudite scholar and a female activist. Today, she will be speaking on rationale for national policy of migration. The last but not the least is Professor Hakeem Ibikunle Tijani, who is the pioneer director of the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies at the National Open University of Nigeria from 2020 March to August 2021. He is a distinguished historian who has contributed widely to his discipline. He is a professor of history, labor, peace, and urban studies. Pioneer Dean, Adeleke University, 2011 to 2014. Pioneer Deputy Vice Chancellor, Adeleke University, 2014 to 2016. He is an experienced editor, Nigeria's Urban History, Oxford, Rocklaham, 2006, editor, African and the Wider World, Pearson Books, Boston, 2010, editor, African Diaspora and Historical Analysis, Poetic Verses and Pedagogy, San Diego, CEMGS Publication, 2010, editor, International Journal of Migration and Global Studies, 2019 to 2020. Editor, Pedagogy, Teaching and Learning in Contemporary Nigeria, Houston African Diaspora Press, 2021. He's also an author, Britain Leftist Nationalist and the Transfer of Power in Nigeria, 1945 to 1960. It's a routine publication, and it was printed in 2005 and repeated 2006. Author, Union Education in Nigeria, Labor, Empire, and Decolonization since 1945. Fangrave, Macmillan, New York, 2012. He's currently the Executive Director, Global Partnerships, Morgan State University, Baltimore, Maryland, United States of America. He has published in many national and international journals and widely traveled. His beliefs in growing the future, leading the world, and his core values: excellence, integrity, respect, diversity, innovation, leadership. He is a good example and mentor of his discipline. His topic for today's discussion is policy goals, objectives, and strategies. So you will agree with me that today we really have what it takes to put this topic in place because of the very, very enlightened speakers we have on this platform for this symposium. And I want to say, to join me in this panelist work today, I have two of my colleagues. Dr. Nnena Chukuma, he will help us looking at the angle of communicate development, and Dr. John Okaraduru, who will join us later because he's at an important assignment now, but surely will join this platform later, join the director in moderating questions. So you are all very welcome. And without much ado, we are going to start and take off straight, and we hand over to Professor Abdallah Obadamu to.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here to share with you a few thoughts about Nigerian immigration policy. I'm very sorry, but my perspective of that particular policy may be radically different from what people might be thinking. So my presentation is divided into two. The first part of the presentation will be looking at the policy itself, at least the portion that I was asked to look at. And then the second part will be the way forward. And in this way forward, I will be looking at historical data from social anthropology perspective to indicate what I think is the basic fundamental flaws of the Nigerian immigration policy as it currently stands. I would like to seek permission to share my screen.
Yeah, you are permitted, sir.
Now, this is the screen. I hope everybody can see it. Nigeria migration dynamics, trends, patterns, internal and external. Now, I put external and external because those are the areas that I was asked to work with. Now, then the Nigerian policy is a policy document produced by the federal government of Nigeria with communication, with input from other agencies in 2015. And my first problem with it was that it defines migration as the geographic movement of people across a specified boundary for the purpose of establishing a new permanent or semi-permanent residence. Permanent means we are not coming back. That's it. You have gone. You have uprooted yourself and moved to another place. Semi-permanent means that there's a possibility that you can come back. All migrants, of course, come back. They come back home. They spend the time, Christmas, Salah, or whatever it is, with their families back in their original homes. But I don't see how a student could be considered a semi-permanent migrant, because this guy goes over there, studies, and then comes back and develops his own nation. So my basic problem is ambiguity in the definition of what constitutes migration. It also outlines international migration of Nigerians mainly to Europe. And it's interesting. The quote, undesirable migrants are the ones who move to Europe through all these horrible, hazardous ways. The desired migrants that the Nigerian government wants to move out of Nigeria are all heading toward the United States as professionals. It also looks extensively at migrations in West Africa, that is from Ghana, Sierra Leone, Gambia to Nigeria, both in terms of prosperity and in terms of adversity. But most importantly, and I think this is where Professor Hakim will be looking at, it provides a highly bureaucratized implementation mechanism with all sorts of committees, technical working groups, thematic groups, state and non-state actors, which I think it bureaucratizes the whole process because it doesn't indicate precisely where the locus of control is, who is in charge, who determines where we should be going. The policy framework, as it states in the document itself, says that it is comprehensive, integrated, and dynamic document in scope and content. It serves to provide the necessary guidelines and principles to assist the government and other relevant stakeholders to implement the strategies in accordance with national priorities and resources. Accordingly, MDAs and other relevant stakeholders can implement the provision of the policy as appropriate. And I found that very, very interesting. The fact that we are thinking of exporting whole-scale labor from Nigeria to other places. Now, this migratory policy was done in an agreement between different countries. For instance, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan entered into an agreement with Saudi Arabian government, whereby nationals from those countries will be exported as migrants to Saudi Arabia, where they will work. And even the money is not given to them, it's sent directly to the government of their countries. And it is that money that is used for infrastructural development. Similar thing happened with Egyptians when they migrated to the Gulf states. That arrangement was also made. So there are policies where an organized government, a state government, state actors will create a facility in which its own nationals are exported as migrants to other countries for collaboration and for development. It's also what happened between Turkey and Germany. When Germany was being developed, they went to Turkey and pulled out a lot of people who migrated to Germany, and they helped to develop Germany. Of course, at the end of the development period, they wanted the Turks to go back to Germany, to Turkey, and the Turks refused. Because part of the agreement was that when they come in, they will stay in and become German citizens. Similar thing happened in East Africa when Indians were imported to build the railroad in East Africa railway system. So we have cases of a state creating a corridor, migratory corridor of their own people moving to other nations, but that is normally in a bilateral arrangement with the other nation, and that the money or whatever it is that is accrued really comes back to the nation. So if there is a policy that encourages migration, this is not that policy. The Nigerian policy is not. These are some of the challenges. There is an insufficient and unreliable data on in and outflows of Nigerian immigration process. I mean, nobody knows exactly how many people are moving in and out, because when people go out to study, they don't say I'm migrating. I mean, Professor Hakim and Erica right now in America, they are not migrants. They're just simply going there for an assignment to come back. So that data on migration will need to be specific in terms of who is moving out and moving out permanently. Students who go for their studies metrics and the dynamics of migration. Further challenges were because of porous borders that are easily circumnavigated. People go through. I mean, if you go to Ilela in Sokoto, which is the border town between Niger and Nigeria, you'll be shocked at the way people just simply move in between the borders. Right now, right outside my house, there is a Megad, security guard, and he's from Niger. And he has an incredible way of sneaking in and out of Niger without any passport or anything. We also have a variegated migration pattern. There are people who migrate formally. Like if you want to migrate to Germany, you go to the German embassy, you register yourself, and then you explain your reason and so on, and they process you. Same thing with migration to Canada. That one is also encouraged in a particular process. But in this case, there are many people who smuggle themselves out of the country. So there are so many varieties of migration pattern that is very, very difficult for the document to tell us precisely which is the legal one and which is the preferred one and the one which the government will prefer. There's also general lack of current information on both stock and flow of migrants within and outside the country. And when I say within the country, how many migrants we have, without the document tend to focus too much attention on outflows, but it's not focusing attention on inflows, on people from other parts of the world that migrate. And that is why I say at the second part of my presentation, I will be providing a social anthropology perspective of inflow, inward migration, and how communities were formed as a result of this inflow migration. So migration policy is not just on out migration, but should also be on in migration. We need to capture those people who are with us. But ironically enough, this document considers anybody who comes into Nigeria as an alien, like he's come from outer space. And yet, if Nigerians are referred to as aliens in other places, you see all the Nigerian foreign missions getting annoyed, getting angry because Nigerians are being demeaned, whereas we are officially doing that. Horizontal migration within Africa, particularly migration that is within West Africa, is affected by security challenges from insurgency and terrorism. Now, you don't even know who is coming in. Whether it is ISWAP, whether it is ISIS, or whatever it is, or some other kind of alphabet soup terrorist deciding that he just simply doesn't like the way other people look, and then he starts putting up an AK-47 and then open fire on everyone. So now there is this security challenge. We don't want migrants to come in according to the policy because of these security challenges that are attached to people who come from other parts of West Africa. There's too much violence going on. So now you tend to be very, very careful about whom you allow in. But it is okay to allow people to move out, whether they are terrorists or not. In fact, the more terrorists move out of Nigeria, the better, because that means there will be more security in Nigeria. There's also vertical migration to Europe affected by natural barriers, seas, deserts, forests, and most importantly, racism. Look at what is happening in Ukraine, the Ukraine-Poland border. Because of this war, a Russian war with Ukraine, a lot of Africans moved out. They want to get out of the place. And when they got to the Polish border, they were racially profiled. And they were not given the same kind of level of attention that other white refugees were given. And from later on narrative that came out, we are made to believe that excuse me, just a minute. From the data that we have, we are made to believe that arrangements were being made to remove to bring back those Nigerians that were trapped in Poland, and they don't want to come back. Now, I have experienced this also. When I was living in Warsaw, we had some Nigerian migrants that were illegal, and they were taken to a jail. And the Nigerian embassy was asked to facilitate their transfer back to Nigeria to serve their jail sentences. And I was part of the team that talked to them. They said they don't want to come back because while in jail, they have 3 meals a day, they have electricity, they have water, they have everything. They are perfectly all right. They can stay out and serve their sentences, and they will learn skills, new language, and so on, but they had no intention of coming back. So in other words, they would rather remain in prison in Europe than to remain free in Nigeria, because in Nigeria, they're not sure whether they will survive or not. Migratory policy contradiction, what I see from the migration policy that I've looked at. In terms of prosperity, Nigeria expelled illegal immigrants in 1983 and in 1985. At that time, we are very rich. We don't want people who are illegal, particularly Ghanaians. And then IMF came along with its conditionalities in 1986 when the economy started going down. And the next thing we know, we have structural adjustment program. And in the subsequent times of economic hardship, Nigerians become now immigrants to Europe. So whereas in 1980s, we are happy that we can expel people that we consider illegal immigrants. When the economy started going down, Nigerians become illegal immigrants themselves, particularly in Europe. Students were seen as migrants, which I believe they are not, because they are going to come back. They had no intention of setting up their lives over there. When I studied in London and Sussex, I had no intention whatsoever of staying behind. Even when I was in the US as a Fulbright scholar, I had no intention of staying one day longer than I have to. So I was a student, a researcher, and I want to come back home. So that doesn't make me an immigrant. Government policy actually perceives students as immigrants. And most importantly, the contradiction of the policy is that it encourages Nigerian professionals to migrate and bring home the bacon as diaspora remittance, but only to families and not to the nation. The policy itself admitted that the money that Nigerian diaspora make and transmit to Nigeria, and they have all sorts of figures from World Bank, from everybody, that shows that a lot of money is being transported by these diasporic Nigerians to Nigeria. That money does not translate into physical and social development at all. What the money does is that it goes into individuals. So if you have a son and a grandmom, granddad, or whatever it is, the money goes to them, but it doesn't go into the economy. Of course, when they get the money, they spend it in the economy. But we're thinking in terms of infrastructural development, roads, healthcare services, and so on, that will support the government in its effort to provide social services for people. And yet, whereas it encourages Nigerian professionals to move out, it also bemoans the idea of brain drain, claiming that there is a highly skilled professionals live in the country. We have seen what happened during the non-residential doctors strike, when Saudi Arabia recruited about 9,000 doctors and that took them away. And everybody was saying they shouldn't be going. And yet Nigeria has not provided the necessary conditions atmosphere for them to work. But even then, the Nigerian migratory policy actually encourages these professionals to leave the country. That is why I see the contradiction. It's not therefore addressing the needs or the reason for migration. Why are Nigerians migrating? Of course, we know why they are migrating. Poverty, lack of jobs, lack of desire to do something, and so on and so forth. That's the reason. We need to understand how we can address these challenges. When we address these challenges, then we can now come up with a clear migration policy that is favorable to Nigerians. So I think it's very, very important that these migratory contradictions should be looked at. The main one is that it seems to encourage people to go outside because of diaspora remittance, and also professionalization of services in other countries where Nigerian professionals will go and provide excellent services. Nigerians are doing very well in Kuwait, from what I've been told, and also they are doing very well in Qatar. I have friends who live in Qatar. They migrated to Qatar. They're not coming back. And the society has been very, very receptive of what they have been doing. So yes, there are clusters of success stories. Of course, Nigerians in Texas and Florida and all the other places are also examples of success stories. And at the same time, there are also examples of bad Nigerians like Hush Puppy case and so on and so forth. But the fact remains that Nigerian migration policy seems to encourage Nigerians to move out of the country, particularly those that are professional. And when you go down, reading in between the lines, you could see that the main purpose of encouraging Nigerian migration outside is because of diasporic remittance that Nigerians bring in. So I don't believe that the policy is really addressing the issue of migration at all. So what are the ways forward? The ways forward, archival data show that the Nigerian migration policy is about outward rather than inward migration. And when I say archival data, I'm looking at historical data. Professor Hakim is a historian, and therefore he knows this more than I do. The data is based on what my old father, my late father did on this particular issue, plus other data that we've been able to get. Kano is one of the most variegated multicultural societies in the country. I doubt very much if there is any society in Nigeria that is as multicultural as Kano. Kano is a place where the Fulani conquered in about 1807. But the Fulani lost their language and acquired the Hausa language because the Hausa refused to accept any Fulani language. So you have a person who will claim to be a Fulani person, but he could not speak Fulani language. I'm one of them. I'm Fulani, but I cannot speak the language. I can only speak Hausa language. So Kanu has, yeah, the way forward. And I accuse or I criticize the Nigerian migratory policy as being outward bound rather than inward bound. And I have archival historical data that shows how effective the inward bound migration is likely to be. Now, historical data show that the conditions necessary for inward flows of migrants to Nigeria, and data from Kano in northern Nigeria shows how historical community formation has created safe haven, I call it safe haven, for migrants from non-contiguous and racially different nations. This is based on historical information from the deserts, from North Africa. That's when they all travel to Kano, which is the main migratory corridor. The Trans-Saharan trade route provided the main migratory corridor from North Africa. And it ended directly in the famous Kano Kurmi market. The merchants who eventually settled in the city were from Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, Morocco, and Egypt. Later, Syrians from Syria also followed the trade routes and stayed. And they settled and intermarried with Hausa women, creating a Hausa Arab identity and community, which eventually lost their language and became Hausa. So just like the Hausa, the Fulani lost their language and became Hausa when they conquered Kano, the Arabs who also migrated into Kano lost their Arabic language and accepted only the Hausa language. And this radically affected and altered the cultural landscape of Kano in terms of food, clothing, religious practices, and trading networks. And probably the reason why this worked is because of religious synergy between the immigrants and the settlers. They both share the same religion. They don't share the same race because these guys were white, these guys were black. But because they had a common interface in religion of Islam, it became very easy to accept each other. The British colonial occupation of Kano in 1903 facilitated more Arab migration to Kano. And the next wave was led by the Lebanese. They're mainly Christian, and if they are Muslim, they are Shiite. And they settle along the local populace, trading in skin and leather, cola and cotton. They rarely marry in local women, so they remain aloof from the main community, although they spoke the Hausa language very, very fluently. They established industries in textiles and household goods, mokarim, foam, beds, mattresses, textile, and all that. These are all owned by the Lebanese. And the Lebanese were later followed by the Yemenites from Yemen. They also settled in Kano as colonial leather agents, trading in leather goods. They integrated with the local population, like the Tripolitanian Arabs from North Africa, lost their Arab language and became Hausa. One of them from that community was the one who was kidnapped in the Kaduna to Abuja train, and the managing director of Bank of Agric and Industry, who was alleged to have paid about 60 million, 100 million for his release. And one Hassan is from that particular community. Now, I have just to illustrate how the Lebanese perceive themselves in northern Nigeria. I'm sorry, those who may not speak Hausa may not understand it, but I will explain. Here it is. Now, this man is owned Tahir Guest Palace in Kano, and he was a migrant, and he identifies not as a Lebanese, but as a Hausa. The lady was his daughter, and she's trying to speak the language, and he's laughing at her, and he's surprised that although she's from Fagé, which is a suburb in Kano where the Lebanese live, she could not speak Hausa very, very fluently. So this just goes to show an example of community integration. Now, Kano also served as a final destination for people from southern Nigeria, and as well as other parts of West Africa. This again was facilitated by British colonial occupation in the city and the subsequent establishment of both colonial civil service and the railroad linking Kano to Lagos to transport goods. Sierra Leoneans, Ghanaians were the main West African settlers. The Yoruba, the Igbo, the Nupe, and the Edo also came later. The Edo were actually, the Nupe and the Edo were living inside the heart of the city because some of them were Muslims, but the Yoruba and the Igbo stayed outside the city. But eventually they all moved outside the city in an area that is called Sabangari. Sabangari means guest quarters. Then the Emir of Kano, Abbas, in about 1804, refused to allow non-Muslims into the city for some reason or the other. And this is a setback for community integration. But the Nigerians remain and consider Kano their home. So you have a lot of people who are now from other parts of Nigeria who live in Kano, and they consider Kano their home. We even have a term for them, Muna Kano. That is, we are living in Kano. Ladies and gentlemen, my conclusion is very simple. I argue that the Nigerian migratory policy focuses more on outward-bound policies. It values diaspora formation and foreign exchange remittance. While encouraging migration, it has no mechanism for controlling the behavior of migrant Nigerians in their destination countries, because when they go there, they just simply disappear into the public culture. There was no critical analysis of why Nigerians migrate in the first place and what policies needed to be in place to stem the tide of migratory outflow. There's a need, therefore, to rethink the policy in terms of inward migratory flows and community formation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. At least we were able to learn one or two things. I don't know if Dr. Nena is there. You can just quickly give us a recap. Dr. Nena, are you there?
Yes.
Can give us a recap of what the speaker just said to us, just some salient points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you very much, Ma. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you, Ma. I want to appreciate our immediate Vice Chancellor, Professor Abdallah Ubadamu, for this interesting and exciting, and I mean very, very exciting seminar that he had just delivered to us. He spoke, I was just rapt and I was listening to everything that he was saying. And I think not just me, every other person will totally agree, especially on the area that our interest on migration policies basically is on remittances, diaspora remittances, and not on concomitant or no measures to also buttress or to address other issues that has to do with migration. He spoke on Nigerian dynamics, trends, and patterns. Of course, emphasis on internal and external migration in Nigeria. And then he also looked at the policy itself and then the way forward. In looking at the policy itself, he looked at what migration is in terms of permanent and semi-permanent. Under the permanent, he talked about people who had migrated to a particular area and decided to, remain there, and semi-permanent people who are there and, of course, may likely go back to where they are coming from. He also looked at outbound migration. Of course, the migration policy in Nigeria, the emphasis is on outbound and not inbound. Then he looked at migration as the policy, as it has to do with Nigeria, that does not encourage migration on itself. That is the outbound. That does not encourage outbound migration, but rather inbound. He also looked at varieties of migration in terms of formal and informal migration. Of course, the emphasis here are people who just sneak in and out. I think I like the example he gave about the security man at the gate from Niger, who just maybe through the back door just walks out of the country and then goes in there, then at his own time just walks in without any proper document that shows whether he's in or out of Nigeria, which talked about the informal migration, and then the formal, which takes into consideration the formal documentation processes that need to take place before the person goes out of Nigeria. I'm also interested in the challenges that he has listed about the varieties of migration in Nigeria. And then of course, as a way of conclusion, he looked at the ways forward. Of course, he underscored how Nigerian migration policies had encouraged outbound rather than inbound. And of course, our emphasis of values on the diaspora remittances, which basically goes to the families and not even the nation. In other words, these remittances, the interest is on just the individual and the family, and not even how these remittances can be used to boost the general economy of the country. Sir, on that note, I think I want to appreciate you for this very, very exciting lecture. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nancy, for that wonderful presentation. At least we were able to capture very salient points. Thank you so much. And now I'm happy to announce to us that the second speaker has been with us just as about the time Professor Abdallah started his presentation. So he's around and he's ready to take a second position. And that is the person of Dr. Awa Madi, who is going to take us now on Rationale for national policy of migration. And in her absence, we've already introduced her, so she will just go straight to her presentation. Doctor, you have been given the mandate to share your screen. You are a co-host. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I don't think everybody knew, but I had written earlier to say I wasn't well last week, unfortunately. And I also traveled. Actually, I'm not in my home right now as I speak, I'm elsewhere. So with that apology, I will nonetheless go ahead and I'll share my screen with you. There it is. I don't know, is that visible for everyone?
Yeah, we can see you, ma'am. We can see the screen. Thank you.
So I started by saying I agree with Professor Abdullah almost to 100%. I have some pockets, but I'm not going to raise that because my part is really just about the rationale of the policy itself. I personally think that the committee that developed most of it, although my focus is on the rationale, did a good job of identifying the causes of the migration, but I had the problem of how they are defining migration, because where I agree with Professor Abdallah is the idea that migration means emigration. They're really all the time talking about Nigerians moving out, rather than all the other dimensions of migration. But I will leave it at that and just say there's a problem there. They are just thinking about Nigerians abroad. And I think that logic, I also agree with him, arises from the idea that, and that's kind of my last slide, and I'll come to that, the idea that Nigerians in the diaspora should contribute to development, or they are the basis of development in Nigeria. And I think that's a very faulty starting point. In fact, I'll go so far to say that's the idea that basically the Nigerian political elite wants to shift the responsibility of development to other people rather than to themselves, like dodging the bullet. They don't want to address why there is problem in Nigeria, so they shift it to how development should be through others. But nonetheless, I start by giving a summary of what I think are the highlights of the rationale, which is at least that we can hold the state, the Nigerian state for, which is the obligation, that it has the obligation to protect the rights of citizens, irrespective of where they are. Secondly, that this policy sees that it needs to therefore establish national instruments, certain principles and laws and so on about how that should be achieved. So the objectives of this policy is to create a uniform administration for migration. Remember, I keep saying what they mean by migration is emigration. They're not talking about anything else. It's about moving out, not about other dimensions of migration. And I also highlight from what you can see my slide, I highlight in red, harness migration in development. I think that's the biggest problem in the whole document, that it is intended to harness migration, or in other words, Nigerians in diaspora, as a means to development in Nigeria, which is why I highlight it here in red. To do that, they want to use efficient and effective migration policies through agreements, protection, and all kinds of other things, with the intention also to eradicate things like trafficking, encourage participation of Nigerians in the economy within. Again, it's about the remittance part. They want to seek out better methods of remittance. They also want to be gender sensitive in that policy. So these are the outline, as I understand, the objectives of creating this migration policy. The strategy they give it is, and I'm kind of moving fast, I hope you don't mind, because I hope we can have a more interesting discussions through questions rather than what any one person can say. The strategy of achieving this better migration policy is by creating institutions. So they go on to create the National Commission for Refugees, the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. They also want to do that by reviewing and creating and enabling laws and regulations, immigration laws, protection of migrants, anti-trafficking laws, child and labor laws, and they refer specifically to the CRA of 2003 and mention the resistance, especially in northern Nigeria, of domesticating the CRA, the Child Rights Act of 2003. I went further to look at the largest diaspora population. This is independent of the rationale itself to be able to understand what they mean. So the largest diaspora is supposed to be in the US, which is approximately 800,000 persons, and in the United Kingdom of 220,000. That's the estimates that are given in from different sources. What is expected from this diaspora is financial and skills. These are the two contributions that they are expected to make in the development of Nigeria. And so I go into specifically to look at the US, how many, we know how many they are, but how skilled they are. And in fact, the Nigerians that are in the US, I don't try to understand their reasons for being there. They are, I'm sure, very diverse. But that of those Nigerians, 800,000 of them that are there, 37% are graduates, and that is higher than the average population in the US itself of graduates. So 29% of those 37% of Nigerians have advanced degrees as well. That means masters and upwards. In other words, they are very highly skilled. I didn't put it here, but they are also they have a relatively higher income proportionate to the general population. They have about 52,000, I think, dollars or something like that. I'm not very sure, but slightly above the average of that population. I'm giving all this because the thinking of the Nigerian government is how much these people will send back to Nigeria and how that is going to develop Nigeria. And so I also give a rough estimate of the last 2 years of the national budget of Nigeria and the amount that the remittance actually brings in, just to be able for us to compare. And the remittance, therefore, is often at least 50%. And before the pandemic, it was even more than 50% of the budget, the national budget. While I agree with Professor Abdullahi in this respect that we cannot see what individuals send to their families as part of, policy, we do have to reflect about what impact it has on the Nigerian population. In other words, in my thinking, all these billions of dollars that are sent by diaspora is actually protecting the political and the elite of Nigeria by taking responsibility for their families. It is making it easier for those who are controlling the state to actually pay less and less attention on what they are supposed to be doing. So although it is not policy, it is ameliorating the extent of poverty that could have existed in Nigeria without those billions that are sent to private individuals, whether it's to pay the hospital bill or whether it is to pay for education of children. I'm saying we cannot ignore those billions, even if they are not the policy of the state, because they do make a difference within the country about what is going on there. And so that's why I give the rough estimates, both only for 2001 and for 2021 and 2022, and also the expected estimate for 2023 as well. So this is kind of my view, my outline of the intentions and the policies and the expectations, how the policy on migration is rationalized. And as I said, I repeat, it is centered about on two things, remittance and skills. what the diaspora can contribute to Nigeria in development: money and skills. As Professor Abdullah also said, and here I lift a citation from the migration and development that the African Union itself developed. And for me, reading this citation means our governments throughout the continent, but our government in Nigeria as well, recognize the source of the problem in Nigeria. In other words, they talk about push and pull factors, but they pay less attention in this document to the push factors, but rather pay attention to the pull factors, which is that there is money to be made out there, which is why Nigerians go. They don't look at why the problem from within is why Nigerians go. And that's why I took this citation and highlighted in red some of the parts as well. How can we apprehend? How have they so far worked to apprehend? In other words, to deal with the problem of emigration. I basically leave out immigration into Nigeria. I don't see that as a problem personally, because it's minimal. And it's only when, like the example he gave, that the Nigerian government wanted to draw attention to something else. So they point out Ghanaians as a problem. Next time they point out we talk about Boko Haram and they point out to terrorists. That is kind of deflection of what the problem actually is in Nigeria. Draw attention temporarily, get emotions heightened about foreigners making this and that as a way of diverting attention to why fundamentally the Nigerian state is not functioning, which is why people go or pack and go elsewhere, seeking solutions. In any case, the way they see the apprehension of that problem is by creating internal policies. Here I divide internal very broadly. Internal to mean internal to Nigeria. I take ECOWAS as internal, and I take the African Union as also internal. That is an Africanist perspective which says the issues that relate to all the countries of the African continent are very similar. And so in whatever position they take, they have to work together. So I see those as internal. I also say we have to pay attention, probably we need to pay more attention to the global linkages, which is what this policy is not doing, this policy document. It pays some service to it by mentioning it is working with the IOM, International Office for Migration, is working with the UN sometimes, is working with having bilateral relations with the EU on migration and so on, but really not substantially, in my opinion, looking at the global linkages or why we have immigration from Nigeria and from other African countries as well. I make a list of them here: the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and other bodies as well, including the IOM itself. In that sense, therefore, if I take this stance that the Nigerian state sees the global policy, the beginning, the IOM and other bodies as correct in the first place. And so in that sense, the policy is well developed because it is playing into the regulatory systems that exist. To that extent, it is correct. It is going through, the proper channels. It recognizes the causes of emigration out of Nigeria. It also has intergovernmental cooperations and multilateral cooperations as well about migration. It has serious, even within that context, however, it has serious problems of implementation. These failures are caused by persistent weak institutions within Nigeria. It is persistently challenged by corruption and other such institutional problems. There's a failure to stem the push factors, and probably that is the most important. Failure to address the issues why Nigerians move out. Among other things, I mentioned here the quality and access to education, employment, including employment of opportunities, including self-employment opportunities. I don't mean government employing people. I mean the skills that allows people to create jobs for themselves or to be creative enough to create opportunities for themselves within Nigeria. And I'm saying there's a failure in that respect. Thirdly, I say there's too much emphasis on the financial dimension of diaspora contribution to Nigeria. And I think that's the wrong way to look at migration in any stretch. And that is kind of undergirded by the experience of 2008 when the financial crisis, can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So there's too much emphasis on the financial, and I think that's the wrong way to go, because we know in 2008 when there was so-called financial crisis, the diaspora remittances dipped. When again, because of the pandemic, 2020, 2021, the remittances dipped, and therefore, of course, throwing Nigerian families, many Nigerian families instantly into crisis. That is not a reliable way, I'm saying, to think development. There's little focus. The other side that I think is more important is actually the skills, because we know that those Nigerians who are working, doing well, as I agree with Professor Abdallah, they are the bad eggs as well, but actually the majority of Nigerians are doing rather well, and therefore acquiring skills. Not only direct skills, I think the way I think is that interacting with people with other cultures other than your own, wherever that is, both within Nigeria and between Nigerians and others outside, is a plus. It gives you something to think about. You don't have to agree with what they do, but it gives you something to think about. In other words, it opens your mind to a different future than where you think you are. And I think those skills are not being tapped because we are emphatic on money exchanges, money being sent. And I think that's the wrong way to think. I'm not saying money is totally irrelevant, but it cannot be the basis on which you build or think about development. So that's the internal. The external, which is the global or international. I think the Nigerian policy, this document, and the Nigerian policy in general is not addressing the global establishment structures. I say again, the global internals global structures, I mean, including the UN, the problems within the UN on the political dimension. I say decision-making on migration. I think we have left that out completely, which is that I didn't put the emphasis here, but I personally, since I believe in the right to migrate or the right to human mobility, irrespective, I think we need to address seriously the question of nation-state bordering, because the problem of looking at migration actually is about the boundaries we have created in the last 150 years. Talking about history, the nation-state has a history no more than 150 years. And we are building the fate of people, the possibility of where they can or cannot go, based on something that is 150 years old. You must ask yourself, when I think at migration, I think 200-300 years ago, people moved in all directions. That direction of movement at that time was more from Europe to the rest of the world. For some reason, that was okay. It is not okay for the last 100 years, especially because the movement has changed direction. Okay? And I want us to, when we think just kind of theoretically to think migration, to think beyond what is today, but to think what are the logics. And when I say this problem of nation-state bordering, what I mean to say is how those in global power are changing the rules of movement, of human mobility. And we're going along to accept and create this policy to fit into that way in which they think how the world should be. The world that has been created that is unequal, as I said, the last point there is connected to racism as well. You have created a world in which the world is structured, where the haves are white and the have-nots are black. And I say citation mark, blacks in a broad sense, all those that are not white. But this is built around the idea of the nation state. This is also politically upheld by the United Nations system, where you have the Security Council, which is the only body really that takes serious decisions about the world, including migration. We are not challenging that adequately, I think, both as Nigeria and as Africa broadly speaking, the continent. to be able to address some of the challenges that leads to migration, I'm saying, requires having the political voice where the decision makings are changed. And that leads me to the questions of the rules of trade, financial rules, and all that around the world. And you can't make these changes if you don't have a political voice to participate in. I already mentioned the question of the social dimension of the global world that we live in, of racism, in a broad, very broad sense, racism. So lastly, do I have time still?
Yes, you can continue, ma'am.
Okay, so this is kind of my last points here. How can we stem immigration? That means the document is about the movement of Nigerians out rather than other people coming into Nigeria. How can we stem that? Because I do think there's a problem where massive numbers of Nigerians are annually seeking to leave. I take parallels with another time in African history, and I'm talking about the period between 1600 or thereabout 1550 to 1870. This is the period of the Atlantic slave trade. One of the central problems that have faced Africa, and especially West Africa, is precisely because of the export, I do like that, export of the most skilled peoples in our region. That was, you could say, out of ignorance or whatever reasons. It's a shameful period, I think, for Africans as well. But let's move forward into the 21st century, to the 20th and 21st century. We are doing the same thing. We are allowing skilled people to move out. And I think we need to work towards preventing that immigration trend. One of the ways I'm saying is to hasten incorporation of diaspora skills into the Nigerian system. The other is addressing insecurity, which itself is a product of the global inequalities we have. Part of the reasons anyway are global, part of it are national. Addressing corruption, we have let that go on for too long. We have talked for too long. For 40 years at least, I've heard it said again and again. And I don't think we are anywhere, okay, some efforts are being made, but I don't think we are anywhere close. And until we begin to address that, immigration will continue. Immigration does not happen in isolation from all the other failures in the Nigerian state. We also need, in my opinion, a more open and tolerant society. I think Nigeria of 2022 is less tolerant than Nigeria of 1970 or 1980 that I recall very clearly. It is more intolerant. That contributes to the insecurity and the violence we have in our society. I say these are short term. These are things we need to do like today, which we'd have done yesterday. These are instant things we need to do, and they don't require much financial kind of commitment to say you need huge budget to do if you really want to do that. In the long term, I mean, we have to do more construction of durable state institutions. This take longer time because we have allowed it to deteriorate for the last 50 years. We will need even longer time perhaps to build them, but we have to start somewhere. So long-term construction of durable state institutions. Secondly, addressing poverty through quality and accessible education. I think the Nigerian education system is collapsing, has been collapsing for the last 30 years. As I remember from 1986, definitely when the Babangida government started to accept the, the IMF rules. And I think we need to stem that. Education, not the elitist education that says I have to get a job in the government, but that kind of education that opens the mind so that individuals are able to explore opportunities for themselves, how they can move society forward. But also education which is accessible to every child, every young adult, every adult who wants an education. And I think Nigeria, I'm saying this because Nigeria has the resources to do it. We could have done it. It's simply we had a system that prevented, almost actively prevented the expansion of education, the raising quality education for, and which is accessible to everyone. I also put in the long term to think in terms of reducing class and inequality. Part of the causes of poverty is the creation almost systematically over the last 40 years especially, systematic creation of an elite class that is parasitic, does nothing, just takes money out of the public resources of our common good. And so working towards class equality is for the interests of most Nigerians or every Nigerian, creating a peaceful environment, but also giving opportunities for young people especially to access all kinds of things. That is on the national basis, long-term and short-term. At the international level, stemming immigration is number one, working for fair treatment for migrants. That is the short term. To persistently pursue as a state the need to treat Nigerians wherever they might find themselves to be treated fairly and equally. Second, to assist Nigerians in need who are abroad. This already kind of, this NIDCOM is trying to do, but I think it can do a lot more. To ensure functioning Nigerian missions. At the moment, many Nigerian missions don't function. The embassies and whatnot, all those. They're, function in terms of in their relationships with Nigerians in those countries. That is the short term. In the long term, the Nigerian government needs to get seriously engaged. These are moves towards stemming. That means reducing the amount of Nigerians that want to immigrate. In the long term, it needs to start working seriously for environmental justice. At the moment, we are kind of pursuing other countries that we think we have a serious impact of the global system that is unjust to our environment. The natural climatic environment. The desertifications, the corrosions, that are happening in Nigeria are part of that product. And I know people also kind of talk a lot on the emotional side about Fulani, about farmer conflict. These are all products of that environmental problem. And we are not fighting to put ourselves on the map and put demand on those who created this climatic problem. That is also part of the solutions towards stemming emigration from Nigeria. Secondly, to work towards working to change the exploitative global relationships. By that, I mean, Nigeria needs to engage seriously with the IMF, with the World Bank, with the World Trade Organization. Now we even have our own national sitting on top of it. We also need to take issues with the International Office of Migration and other such bodies to seriously work towards challenging the exploitative relationships in which we are in. This system will not end in 1 decade or 2 decades. This is a system that has been built for the last 500 years. It's not going to end whatever laws and declarations we make. But we can start making demands. At the moment, we are always just following up what other people have done. And I think we have the capacity to make a more forthright demand on the global system to change the way we do our exchange, our trade system. Those who are economists, I'm sure, know much more than I do about the inequality of what is paid for the labor. I tell myself, I buy a banana in Sweden at the same price I will buy it in Nigeria. There's something wrong there. If you are buying the banana in the same price, there's something wrong. And that for me is a symbol of the exchange, of goods and services that are not in our favor from this word go. So this is my, I think, last slide, and I'm asking here, the assumptions of the whole document, the assumptions of the rationale is where the central problem lies. That the assumptions are that the global order is fair. So we need to just find a way. We tweak, make it possible for migrants, send money there, find skills there. We are assuming that the system is fair already, and therefore it is us who are the failure. We are a failure, but not in that way, because the system is already unjust. That's my thinking. We also work from the premise of this document that remittance should form part of development. I say we are buying into the tropes of the World Bank in particular, because the World Bank went so far, I think now should be about 10 years ago, to open a branch of the World Bank through which migrants can remit money. That is the wrong way to go. I mean, thinking that to facilitate moving money. I say these are tropes of the global order. They are not a solution to the immigration of Nigerians. They are not a solution to the development challenges of Nigeria. Thank you. I stop there.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I really appreciate this work, but let me not say it all. Let us call on our wonderful doctor who will do justice to it. Can you quickly give us the highlights, Dr. Nasi, of this beautiful presentation? Dr. Nasi, please. Dr. Nasi Ukuma.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Anito, and thank you, Dr. Hawa, for that fascinating, very, very provocative point of departure. I say point of departure because going from the lecture we had from Professor Abdallah, and then how you brought a version or an angle or another angle to the former lecture that we had. You talked about rationale for national migration policy as it has to do with Nigeria. And of course, the basics of the rationale, the emphasis that you made is to encourage the political class not to shift their responsibilities to Nigerians in diaspora. And then in doing this, you looked at the objectives to boost or the objectives to review the Nigerian migration policy to eradicate, among other vices, trafficking and other vices that you had listed, with the expectation of getting in return finance and skills, which you underscored as one of the most important that Nigerians should be looking at for. He also looked at internal problems or problems that borders on implementations of this policy, with emphasis on too much financial contributions.
Let's just give Dr. Nasi just 1 or 2 more minutes. But if not, we round off and go to the next presenter. So she was just giving a quick summary there of this beautiful presentation. No doubt, the salient points we put out, because we are going to have a communique at the end of this symposium. So the rest assured that the communique will be sent to the presenters, at least if not to everyone, for us to look at it, perhaps in a more detailed way to take resolutions and action that can come out from these presentations. We really want a good action to come out, and this action we want is, we want an action that can reach the people, that can effect a new policy that will address what we have identified here as deficiencies and as way forward. So because I gave her that assignment to be noting the point, I guess that if she's able to come back with her internet, she may round off. But meanwhile, I want to really thank you, Dr. Hawa Madi, because you did justice to your topic. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Without much call on the next presenter, because after this discussion proper with comments, because people will ask questions and there will be comments, all this will be part of our community at the end of the day. So Professor Akim Tijani is our third speaker for the day, and they are ready for us, and he will be speaking on policy goals, objectives, and strategies. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon at your end. Please go ahead and share my slide. While you're trying to do that, let me say that I did not meet virtually with the two speakers before me, but there is a convergence of spirit, and that spirit is so strong. If you were given this kind of task to read, digest, dissect, and analyze. I'm saying this because they've identified the problematic in this policy document. Please share for me. I want to speak. I want to flow as rapidly as I can before the two girls come downstairs to distract me. I did not meet with them, but I will start by saying that the problematic are so much in this policy document. First and foremost, we must note that this is not a research paper. We are not presenting, and I'm not presenting goals and policies as it should be in terms of my own ethnographic research and what have you, but to x-ray what chapter 4, which is the largest in the document, is all about. I talked about problematic, and I'll come back to that. I also want to thank Dr. Aneto for stating that the document is under review. The document is under review. And having said that, I think we have a validation of going to part B of our discussion, which again is about the spirit. I did not talk to Dr. Awa, neither did I talk to Professor Abdallah. But part B of this interrogation is to speak from the heart and mind as we see it and based on experience. I was saying that we did not reach out to each other, but yet we have the same spirit guiding us. They've identified most of the problematic, and I want to thank you, Madam Director, for at least telling all of us that the document policy you've asked us to read, the 124 pages to read, is undergoing or will be undergoing a review. I see that as important. I also want to thank you that you said you will be having a communique, which is very, very important, so that our words are not just on the ground and it makes no meaningful impact. On that note, I want to give us this caveat. This is not a research paper. This is not a research paper. Don't ask me about or be thinking of asking us about what is our methodology, what is our conceptual framework, what is this and that you will expect in a research paper. And I think that is a valid statement to make and to plead, so that we talk about and discuss the substantial issue therein in that document. I will also skip these remarkable timelines as a historian. I do love to do that. You can, the PowerPoint is shared, and I believe the director will share on the platform. I'm going to skip to that. Chapter 4 is what I've been asked to work on, and it's titled Policy Goals, Objectives, and Strategies. Let me go back to the problematic that I mentioned, because the presentation by the first two speakers really changed my my initial way of presenting this. When I was given the chapter, that is chapter 4, out of the 124 pages document, I was kind of hesitating to do a PowerPoint, but at the same time, I wanted to just pick, based on my notes, which is about 3 pages here. And but the director said, no, we need a PowerPoint. So I've tried as much as possible to present just 9 slides. And I've skipped the first 3 because the presenters have, before me, have mentioned most of what I intend to do over there. but they really hit the nail. And if you are writing a communique, if we are dissecting, if we are going to go into serious interrogation, we must begin to look at the problematic in the current document so that our future is secured. We not only identify the proposition of Dr. Mahdi and that of Professor Adamu, but also look into the three areas that I've identified. And I did this because I checked and checked for the template for a policy document. What are the templates? It's not like writing your dissertation or your thesis or your project. What are the templates? And I think the three of us are in line with what we have identified beyond just telling you the summary or summation of these chapters. Number one, I think I've missed the following. One, the pre-colonial and colonial antecedents. Very, very important in a policy document, because whoever is reading it, whoever is implementing it, must have a sense of history. Thank God to those who pioneered the return of history as a course in our public school. Okay, so we're missing that, except for the globalization context of the policy document. They also mix out in their discussion of the push and pull factor, the triadic relationship, even in the discussion of the remittances as a means to developmental goal, which is apologetic in my view, just to validate Dr. Mahdi. They miss out the triadic relationship that's supposed to be the basis of the concept. A policy paper without a conceptualization will not be grounded in a rich contextualization of the ideas, my view. Lastly, they miss the issue of dual citizenship. Most of the Nigerians, since we are talking about Nigeria migration policy document, A Way Forward, published in 2015, most of those in the diaspora have dual citizenship. How do you, put that in the picture? Again, as Dr. Awa rightly mentioned, NITCOM, our sister in NITCOM, or whoever succeeds down the line, need to begin to do more. And that's supposed to be part of the document. Let me now go on to that chapter 4. The most important thing about it is about policy goals, objectives, and strategies. And I want us to take a serious look at the objectives. I don't want to repeat all of it. The strategies also, I do not want to. And each of the subsections from 4.1 to 3, 4.4, 4.5, -5, 4.6, 4.7, -2, 4.8 to 9. We have, that is the 41 pages that I'm reviewing and summarizing. We have various objectives and strategies. But the big question is, between 2015 and date, have we been able to accomplish one? Have we been able to accomplish one? And I'll come back to that. Let me move on to the next slide. Next slide also, I will just skip it. I'm going somewhere. What are the plus? I have identified the problematic and the shortcomings. But again, we cannot just lay emphasis on the shortcomings. We have to give kudos to the founders, from the late president, Yaradua, to Goodluck Jonathan, to all those scholars that really, serve to get us something to at least talk about, to at least begin to think way forward in our development of Nigeria. One of the plus is the fact that it actually talked about easy access of land for IDPs. And I want to emphasize IDP and refugees. Why? Because I'm lucky to have received a grant from AHRC, I believe in 2019, for £90,000. Don't tell me to write you a check. The money did not go into my account. It's for research, with about 7 or 8 other scholars in Mozambique, Uganda, UK, of course, Nigeria. I was a peer. And the issue of IDP, became so serious. And we talked about decolonizing education in IDPs and the challenges of these forced migrants. The same thing with refugees and their rights. And this document talked about it, but the strategy for actualizing such issue is not well articulated. What are the minors and the unresolved issues? While I have mentioned this to validate what my colleagues have presented, I want to emphasize the last part of this particular slide, the unpreparedness for the future and emerging new threats, the syndemic. Syndemic because no one knows the end of pandemic with all the variants that we now see today. There's also growing insecurity, and there's also, growing of exclusivity. In other words, no matter who you are, you do not belong. And I will share 3 narratives to validate that. I think one of the major addendum to the title of that policy document is Way Forward. And I love it because it validates the rationale for us to at least say something. In that document, I want us to reflect back on slide number 4 of my presentation, objectives and strategies. Again, if you have a copy of that document, you'll see that objectives and strategies are noted on all those 4.1, 4.2, 3, 4, all the way to 4.8-9. But the major objective is well outlined in the first page on page 31. As 7 years after, what is the postmortem? Objectives accomplished, I said a big no. Strategies accomplished, a big no. And the question, as we historians ask, is why? And these are some of the response to that. Ideas never match with actions. Ideas never match with actions. And I will validate this view with real narratives shortly. Corruption unparalleled in modern history. When we say corruption, oftentimes we talk about the ministers, the head of state, the president, the governor, and whatever. What about the individual corruption? Something Esther Mujoke is writing on my slide. I don't know why she has that opportunity to write. Or is it the hand of God? Can you please take off Esther for putting red paint and whatever? It's totally wrong. It's not only a distraction, but awfully wrong. I said the ideas never match with actions. Implementation remain El Dorado. Even at the IDPs, we have challenges. In fact, conducting that research and starting with a second tranche or approval or grant in a 2.8 million pounds was so challenging that my position was different from that NGO that was sent from England to work with me. And eventually I have to just excuse myself because I will not be part of the corruption that was unfolding. But corruption is not and should not be limited to leaders. We also have corruption of the mouth, corruption of the mouth, corruption of the mind. An officer that is asked to implement is not just thinking about the general, picture, but of self. Also, prebendalism rather than selfless service. There's too much prebendalism. What do I get from here? I have to serve, I have to do this because Professor Tijani is a director, so let me, no. There is no objectivity as my profession trained me. Objectivity is the hallmark of historical scholarship. Lastly, federalism. Federalism is still a mirage. It's unfortunate. The policy document tried to kind of couch federalism without necessarily mentioning it. But if you read through page 1 all the way to page 124, you will see an element of the idealism of the spirit to have this. But I have said no, 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 we are still not there. And let me give you the following narratives to justify my position of the fact that the policy is exclusionist and we are not there. The young man that migrates from Kano to Lagos remain an outsider. While I was growing up in our family compound on the island of Lagos, called Kakawa Compound, for those who know the area, the Tunumbu area, we have Hausa exotic bird traders. I grew up with some of them, their children, but they were often treated as outsiders, despite years of coming, residing, bringing these birds as traders to our family compound, renting a room or two. And 1 or 2 of the children going to Christ Church Cathedral Primary School with me, they were seen as outsiders. What type of cohesive, integrative policy on migration are we talking about in 2015? The same thing with the newspaper vendors that sleep outside our huge family compound. I never knew they were outsiders when I was growing up in the late 60s and early 70s. They are vendors with daily times, and every morning you see them distributing papers. Some of them rented, some of them, enrolled their children. But it was sad that they were seen as outsiders, not only by the family, but also by others. What about the Igbo traders in Apapa or in Kano? Why the Sabongeri? To exclude the migrants. And how has this policy really identify with those groups and have the supposedly integrative policy envisaged? It is still a dream, so to speak. These 3 examples or narratives, short narratives, are important, and they explain the last narrative that I want to share with you as I round up. As a young lecturer at Lagos State University in 89, no, excuse me, I joined last year in 89, but in 1991, I was part of the indigenization or the indigene verification stuff for them, to be able to gain scholarship. Even, let us reverse. Given my own personal experience, in 1977, I applied for Lagos State scholarship. I applied
Okay.
for Lagos State scholarship,
Please, people should
and
not
I
be
went for
unmuting
and I
themselves.
went to the interview. And on my paperwork, on my form, I put Epe because my great-great-great-great-grandfather was one of the lieutenants that followed King Kosoko to Epe when the British defeated them. So we still have a family compound there. And I got to the interview and I was being asked about Epe. And I couldn't say much. And I was denied. I went back to my grandpa and I said, well, I've applied for this scholarship and they denied me. And the man that spoke to me, interestingly, a former vice chancellor of University of Lagos, I won't mention his name, he's still alive, said I should go back and ask about where I'm supposed to claim. I'm supposed to claim Kakawa or Logbo, not Ekpe. And my grandpa said, oh, no, I'm not. Why are you claiming Ekpe? I said, but the praise song says something and link us with Ekpe. So I thought, because Lagos Island, maybe too many people vying, so Ekpe maybe, kind of. He did not buy my rationale. Lastly, I went to the king of Ekwe. The moment the old man saw me, I said, oh, Omo Latifu, it is time you people come back home. Which is home? Is home Ekwe, or Lagos Island, where they initially migrated from as a result of the British onslaught. To cut a long story short, I have to do the form again the following year. And I put Ekwe. I put Lagos Island. And I did not spend 1 minute. And I got approved for Lagos State scholarship. But let's go back to LASU to round up. I was on this committee 1991, and I served on that committee just for 1 year and the 1 year alone. Why? Because in my own section, you will see the Janet, the Okafo, the Shinwezu, the non Yoruba, whatever names. And the question is, are they Lagosians? Are they permanent residents? You bet they are. What is the guiding policy paper? Birth certificate from Lagos State. Father must have a property, paying taxes, went to primary school, secondary school, and they've applied to Lagos State University. You tell me why they do not have the right, like Tijani, to attend Lagos State University. And this is not limited to Lagos State University or Lagos State. I'm just giving an example based on my own experience. And most of them, after validating those documents, any part of Lagos State with properties, with taxes, this young, poor Ngozi Emeka cannot even speak Igbo. They won't speak Yoruba better than me from Lagos Island. So I approve of their indigenship as migrant or even born. Their parents were migrant, born in Lagos State. I was, of course, rebooked. I was, of course, yanked off from the exercise, and the rest, of course, is the storyline. So I think this exercise is coming in a very good time. I think that we should advise whoever is in charge of the review of this particular policy document to take into consideration some understanding of our historical past, because he who does not understand its history is doomed to repeat it, but more importantly, is doomed to fail. We cannot talk about integrative, inclusive policy without understanding and tolerating one another. We must, we should. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share one or two things, but also to invite you as we start in August. You can see the number has increased. I have to kind of do my own I can stop sharing now. I have to do my own advert. And because when we started, I was seeing about maybe 14, 20, and I noticed my people were not there. Apologies for sending it late. All these TED Fund, postdoctoral, and PhD students with us at Morgan have joined. If not, we will have had at least 100. That is the minimum. But again, I believe knowledge is shared. We are open to discussion. But if you are just joining us, do not ask me about methodology, about sources. We are interrogating a policy document. So thank you very much, Dr. Aneto.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof, for this wonderful presentation to this topic we have chosen. I think this topic is one of the most interesting topics I think I've listened to since we started this seminars on this platform. Very, very interesting, very, very educative, and I really want to thank you for your efforts. I want to thank you for your comments, for your analysis, and without much waste of time, so that people can ask questions, I will say Dr. Nasi should quickly give the salient points. I know the last time internet took her off, but this time around, we pray for internet support. Okay, over to you, Dr. Nasi.
Thank you, ma'am. Professor Tijani, the expectations was very high, and you over gave us what I was expecting. Thank you very much, sir, for bringing to fore those policy issues, goals, objectives, and strategies of existing policies of migration in Nigeria. You actually talked about the objectives and strategies. Now, when you are looking at the objectives, the emphasis was on how to identify and minimize migration push in Nigeria. That is the need to migrate. And then you looked at attraction of the cities for rural dwellers. That is, how do we reduce attraction of cities to rural dwellers, and at the same time, improving on general environmental condition in Nigeria. Of course, you also talked about the strategies and the plus and minus of the existing policies. Then under the plus and minus, you looked at the easy access. Under the plus, you looked at the easy access to land for IDPs. That is the first migrants. And then on minus, all the unresolved issues of migration, where you looked at the rise and continued push and pull factors to migration. Then you went further to look at the ways forward. What do we do forward? And how ideas had never been matched with actions, as it has to do in the Nigerian context. Of course, federalism in our context is still a mirage. Then you went down to look at the real narratives. What are the real issues? What are the things? What are the realities on ground? The unwritten exclusionist policies, where you looked at being seen as outsiders. In fact, in addition to when you say that, what came to my mind is, why do I still have to put my state or local government or community or village in a document? If these are official documents, or if this is Nigeria, why must I begin to talk about my village or my community before submitting an official document? I think on that note, I was really impressed, and I'm sure that every other person here was also impressed with what you have done. You have actually done justice to that topic, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Nancy, for that wonderful summary of what we have heard from our Professor Tijani. Now, I know many people would want to say one or two things. We are now going to go into the question, comments, and answer session, and all the three speakers, we know their topics, and please, we are going to take each question directly to who you want to answer it as much as possible, so that we'll be fast. However, if it is a general question, any of the speakers can decide to answer. So we take one by one monitor. I have already seen the hands of Professor Emeritus Sogolo up, and I've not seen other hands up. I hope it's not only him who wants to say something about this beautiful topic. More people can raise up their electronic hands if they want to talk. So without much waste of time, I guess 2 hands are now raised up. After Professor Sogolo, is Dr. Paradu, is he still in the house? Is he still in the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Paradu, yes. So we coordinated this question and answer session together. I have seen 2 hands, so let's take it together and help us to note particularly the questions, even though this program is being recorded, but at least, you know, we are going to sit together to look at the communique together at the end of it all. And I'm happy to have you and Dr. Nancy on this platform. So please, sir, Professor Emeritus Sogolo, can we hear from you, sir?
Thank you very much. Now, first of all, I want to congratulate the Center of Excellence for these very, what I call brilliant, presentations regularly. And each time you listen to any of these seminars or discussions, you really get intellectually enriched and you enjoy them. We spent 2 hours now, and still, you feel just, it's good things coming in. Now, this particular presentation today is by people we know very well, former Vice Chancellor, Professor Abdallah. When he speaks, whatever he says flows. And in a way, the topic he has chosen is a topic in his own area. So he really said a lot of things that were very entertaining, very good, stimulating, and so forth. But there's one point I want him to clarify. He is saying, or he made the point that he seemed to say something was wrong in a Nigerian immigrant working in the US and then sending money home to the family, and that it would have been better if that money was sent for the development of the community or development of society and so forth. And I was just laughing and I said, if I was trained by my family privately, if I'm sponsored by my family privately, I go to the university, whatever profession I do, medicine and so forth, and I go to Saudi Arabia and earn my money from Saudi Arabia, why would I send it to the Nigerian society rather than to my family? That was the point. I didn't quite get his argument. But in any case, whatever you send to your family, taking it the other way, you're sending to your country. Your family is part of the country. Your community is part of the Nigerian community. So you are developing your own society. I just wanted to say that. Now, Dr. Hawa Mahdi made her presentation also very brilliant presentation. And I want to congratulate her for this. But again, I have a point which he raised about just one of the laws she was talking about, which simply says that immigrants in Nigeria have a protection. In other words, there's a section of the policy which protects immigrants. Now, there may be one, but the question is that section truly adhered to? I ask this question because there are reports of especially business companies and so forth, mining companies, particularly in the northern part, and then the oil companies in the Niger Delta and so forth. Now, these companies are known for, certain treatment of workers. And, in other words, workers are not respected. Workers are exploited. And yet, what turns out, which is really something that, take seriously, is that the government seems to, just overlook that, such that most of the time, if you were to report a Lebanese or a Chinese company for maltreating Nigerians, the government will just overlook it and think that it's nothing serious. Okay, in other words, that protection is not really given to Nigerians. And the what do you call them, immigrants, although companies and so forth, are protected, maybe for economic interests and so forth. So that's the point I just want to raise for Dr. Howard. Now, as usual, Professor Ibikule Tijani, he talks so smoothly and he goes on and on and on. And his own is very interesting because he was talking more or less about his own experience, and he said it from the beginning. I'm not talking about a research thing, I'm talking about, so he was talking about his experience. And it makes the presentation so interesting. Talks his experience as a Lagos boy and talks about the indigenship treatment and so forth. But again, here you have some problems. You see, when you talk about internal migration and you're talking about the treatment of indigenes and so forth, the question is, I'm relating this to where you talk about the exclusionist thing. Now, you see, it is good that we have our laws and say, okay, when you have stayed in a place for 20 years, you should be treated as an indigene, or nobody should be regarded as a stranger, as you find in the US, for instance, that you can contest election from anywhere, you can do everything from anywhere. But the situation, you must know, in Nigeria is very different. All right, we are in an ethnic-based society, so that it's almost, it's not likely to grow until the education of our people develops to start stage, whereby you can say, okay, this man, wherever he comes from, is this person. But where the language, the culture still, exists the way it is in most parts of Nigeria, that problem is likely to remain with us for a long time. So in a way, I'm trying to suggest that Professor Tijani is being unrealistic to think that Nigeria can become the US, and then everybody will be seen as being an indigene of a local community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Zach. I didn't stop you because I wanted you to have the privilege of Professor Emeritus.
Thank you.
Dr. Paraduru, please, you are going to take it. We are going to time people now so that more people can talk. I can see more hands up, starting from Dr. Mazu. Please, you are going to take 1 minute, 2 minutes maximum, so that we can have more people and the speakers can have the time to respond. Thank you so much. So over to you, Dr. Paraduru.
Okay, I think the next person on the line there, thank you very much, Director of the Center of CEMGS, Dr. Neto. Professor Sogolo, I think you have to raise down your electronic hand now. Then we'll follow you.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Eric, you have the floor now. Just 1 minute, sir, because of many people that will try to ask questions.
Thank you so much, the Director. Thank you also, Dr. Paraduru, for giving me the floor to speak. And I'll go straight to my question, or sorry, not really a question, but a contribution. When Professor Abdallah spoke, and then to some extent, Dr. Mardi, they highlighted the overemphasis of the policy document on immigration, that is the outbound movement of Nigerians, rather than inbound movement of non-Nigerians to our country. They think that such emphasis is wrong. I agree with them that it is wrong. But on a closer look, I think that the policymakers were practical individuals. The question is, what are outsiders coming to do in Nigeria of 2022? Yes, Professor Abdallah showed evidence of foreigners settling in Kano, but that was in the past. I'm sure he will find it very hard to show us records of Lebanese, Syrians, Pakistanis migrating to settle in Nigeria, in fact, in Kano in 2022, you know? So it's difficult for him, it will be difficult for him to show that. My point is that our level of development plays a serious role in the number and quality of individuals who migrate to Nigeria. This same factor is also responsible for the massive immigration of Nigerians to other nations. Now, when Professor Tijani spoke, I see him also trying to solve this problem of showing that the policy tried to solve this problem of immigrating to other places, you know, but then what the policy tried to do was to see that people don't immigrate or migrate from the rural areas to the urban areas. So they were, the policy was advocating for the development of rural areas so that Nigerians don't leave the rural areas to the urban areas. That's what he showed in his own presentation. But then, that is it. If people cannot come to our urban areas, our so-called urban areas of today, because there are no opportunities, there are not good education, there are no jobs. I'm currently in the United States, as you all know. When you move about here, you see, once you leave your street, you're seeing we're hiring, we're hiring, we're hiring. This is a sign you see all over the place. But then you come to Nigeria, Nigerians don't get the opportunity to get employed, to be assimilated into useful ventures where they will make contribution to the country. So what is there for outsiders? That there's little or no opportunity for them when they come in here, you know? So, and I think this plays an important role in the number of people that come to settle in our country. And then it also plays important role, you know, in our people who are leaving the country to settle in other places. So this is my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and do this person. Please unmute yourself, Doctor. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm in a bit noisy environment. That is why I have to mute myself, and I forgot that I was to make comment. Thank you, Dr. Eric, for that wonderful contribution and response to what Professor Abdallah Badamu made and the question you posed. I think I will now move to the next person, Akim Akiwale. You have 1 minute for your contribution or your question. You have the floor now.
Okay, thank you very much. My question is about expatriates in Nigeria who are currently finding it difficult to assimilate despite their intention and interest to do so. And particularly speaking of the few cases I've encountered in my own study who are expatriates from foreign countries, they are working in Nigeria, they got married to Nigerian citizens, and they still find it difficult. They are experiencing a lot of discrimination. When they want to buy land, it's difficult. When they want to do other important things, they find it difficult, despite the fact that they are expatriates and they have gotten married to Nigerian citizens. I have cases, male getting married to female Nigerian citizens, then female Ghanaian who got married to a male citizen in Nigeria. So these people, in my own research, I speak with them, they express concerns over the fact that it's like the country is rejecting them, despite their efforts, their hard work, their professionalism, contributions to development, interests in assimilating with the Nigerian culture. So from the angle of policy that you have reviewed, I don't know if you have come across any part of the policy that can address this challenge. Thank you.
Demu Kala, you have the floor now for your contribution or your question. Thank you. You have the virtual space. Professor Demo Kala, perhaps maybe we'll require you to put on your video and then unmute yourself. You have the virtual space now. 1 minute.
Having internet challenge, possibly, but while waiting for him, please, I want Professor Abdallah to start in that same order. The comments directed to him. Okay, I will on now with Professor. All right,
Hello.
Quickly, sir.
Yeah,
Hi.
quickly. Well, excellent presentations. All the three speakers made excellent presentations, and quite thought-provoking. My comments is that particularly for expatriates, that come into Nigeria and then they work on projects and they don't impact the necessary skills that they have been employed to bring into the country. How is this policy addressing the situation? For example, if we take the mining industry, and Chinese have flooded every side of the northern part of Nigeria. While we look at that, have not yet, addressed the issue of, skill, development, when migrants come, to work here. I think it is important that we have a look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for that contribution towards this presentation made. I would like the director of the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies, Dr. Neto, to take over from here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Paradu. Thank you for your assistance. We've heard the questions and comments just to allow the speakers to make quick responses, starting from Professor Abdallah. He heard the questions directed or comments directed at him. So please, sir, can we hear from you? And then in that order, and the second speaker also takes her own, and the last speaker takes his own, so that we can now round off this session.
Thank you very much. I was in the mosque when the old man was speaking, so I didn't know if he directed a specific question at me. But the most important thing we should understand from this activity is that it's not a question of you agree, disagree. We're all analyzing a particular policy document. This is the document that has been created by the federal government. And this government that outlines a particular policy. And we're saying we're interrogating this document to determine whether it is its inconsistencies, where it goes right and where it goes wrong. And I really believe that it goes wrong on so many fronts, that there may be a total need for overhaul of this thing. The general conceptualization that we have of all this is that, number one, stop Nigerians from migrating. Why do they have to go out? Let them stay and develop the country. Number two, if you have to have Nigerians migrating, it should be a systematized migration in terms of collaboration with other countries, just like Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India did with Saudi Arabia, just like Germany did with Turkey, just like Egypt did with Gulf states. Systematized. That way we know how many people are going out, the kind of labor they are taking over there, the kind of skills they are taking over there, and the money that they are bringing back in. Number three, encourage inward migration. But that inward migration will not be possible if the necessary conditions for survival are so hot for Nigerians that other non-Nigerians will not be able to accept. Now, Eric talked about whether the data shows whether there is still migration. There is, surprisingly enough, people are still migrating from Yemen. They are still migrating. But what we discovered here is that those earliest arrivals who came about 50, 60 years ago and who lost their language don't get on well with the newer arrivals who believe that they are more pure. So they don't interact with them. So we have a three-way relationship. We have the old, we have the Hausa, then we have the Hausa Yemeni, and then we have the Yemeni. And they're all scattered. I mean, they are all divided. They don't really integrate. This goes back to the question that was asked by Professor Demo Kala about integration. And integration is very, very important. So the narrative is, just because you migrate, do you have to integrate? Because this is the problem that the Turks faced in Germany. Migration does not necessarily translate to integration. If you integrate, that means you lose your identity, you lose your culture, you lose your food, you lose everything. So you have to integrate. This is a big debate in Germany. As people know, I'm very familiar with Germany. And the question is, Germans are saying, if you're going to migrate here, you have to integrate, you have to acquire German identity. So that means if you are migrating to another place, you have to lose your own identity and accept the identity of the other. Are people ready to do that? Or do we migrate simply because there's a better life over there rather than better contribution over there? So the better life, is it for us as individuals, or is it for our contribution to the society that we are migrating into? I think the overall view is, why do people migrate? And why do we need to create even a migratory policy for people to move out that systematize the movement of people out? Hawa has raised the issue of corruption, nepotism, and all sort of a variety of things that made people want to migrate. Nobody's going to come into Nigeria with all these kind of things that are going on. We have to fix the country. We have to make it viable so that we can attract people. Like somebody mentioned that the Chinese. I live in Kano, and the Chinese are here. One of the things that we are very proud of in Kano is the dyeing pit. You know, the copper matter indigo dyeing pit. Chinese have taken over that. Now the Chinese come and sit. They own houses close to where the Hausa people live. I mean, they don't segregate themselves and go and live in a GRA. No, they live in the city because they want to understand the ethnography of the city. They want to understand the people, and then they start doing all sorts of things that subvents the current economy. For instance, there is this hula, the cap. They call it chagari. Okay, that's the one that or Buhari or whatever. But the cap that the Hausa people wear, that one is made with a cotton thread, and the cost of that cap is determined by the quality of the cotton thread. Now the Chinese have got a print material of that particular cap. They are just bringing it into the market. So it's very cheap, very, very cheap. The dyeing pits have also been taken over by the Chinese. They are now producing indigo dyes in China that don't smell, that don't rub up your hand, and so on. So migration, economic policy, social policy, integration, these are things that are all tied together. And I don't think the migration policy in Nigeria addresses all these nitty-gritty issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So can we now hear from Dr. Awa Madi?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I will start with the last two questions, which are very similar, about expatriates in Nigeria. I will expand it and say expatriates in the African continent. I think we do not have the experience, let's say. We do have, like Professor Abdallah points out, pockets of mass immigration into certain locations on the African continent. But generally speaking, we are more an emigrant than we are immigrant. Go back to the beginning of human history. We are more emi than immigrants. If you come to the 20th to the 21st century, that is even more problematic, that we don't have policies, really, seriously speaking, to deal with immigration. This document does not also have a policy on immigration. It is mentioned every now and then, but not really dealt with seriously. What do we do if people do come into Nigeria and seek to settle down? Secondly, I'll take the specific case of Chinese in particular. And even more difficult, therefore, because in the case of immigrants who are non-African, we have the additional problem of race and racism. We are not racist-free either. We also, by this, one of the questions that are raised by Professor Kalla, I think, have a way of excluding, seeking to exclude, whether because we lack the policy in terms of how do we deal with immigrants who have a legal status, that is people who are married to, women who are married to Nigerian men anyway, have a status, have a right to become citizens. Of course, men who are married to Nigerian women don't have that status, and therefore they have no grounding whatsoever to seek access to whatever, I do like that, resources that, you know, citizens have. So basically I'm saying we don't have a policy at all. So we have to look for a policy. And I think actually the information which actually is relatively, I do like that again, citation marks, rather frightening. Because in fact, one of the first things the British did when they started to take over Nigeria was to take over the kind of technology that Nigeria had, especially in iron smelting, iron making. A deliberate act to stop the production of iron by Nigerians. That was a very important step. Among other things, the next step they took was not only to put taxes on the iron smelting and iron production in Nigeria, but actually to bring iron slabs and sell them at below market value, just so they can kill the local production. So that worries me very much about what is going on in Kano and maybe what is going on in other places as well. Not trying to scare anybody, just simply saying, history like that has happened before. And I think we need to take charge of some of the basic things Nigeria have, the skills of doing certain things, including the dye pits, including whatever it is going on elsewhere. You know, the artistic productions of Nigeria should also be kind of controlled. I do like this. I mean, the West or other developed countries, what they do is, of course, turn them into trademarks. These are trademarks. Nobody can steal it. You don't make it. It has to be made. Whiskey has to be made in Scotland to be called whiskey. You know, what do you call the British with this? Like a meat pie, Cornish. It has to be from Cornwall. Otherwise, it's not. But we are not doing that. That is why the Chinese can flood the market. That means if that is going on and is going in the next 10, 20 years, there will be no pits in Kano, period. And I'm saying these are serious policies that the state needs to take in hand, not in any way to trying to be xenophobic or anything. In fact, on the contrary, I am encouraging immigration of people from other cultures because it gets Nigerians to think how to do things differently. But it has to be done under an atmosphere in which Nigeria's own knowledge is protected and kept as Nigerian, and not to be allowed to be, how do you say? Because what is happening is being taken away. Is technology being transferred from Kano to China? And unless the Chinese people who are doing it actually become Kanonites, let's say, and remain in Kano for generations to come. Unless they bring the industries into Kano and therefore continue the production of those materials within Kano. So I am saying we have no policy on immigration whatsoever, actually, nonsense, doesn't exist. So we need to take control of that. We need to know what the full import of immigration is. Encourage it, but also control the circumstances under which it happens. Most of our policy is on immigration, on going out, doing things, and I already have a problem with that, like I said. The overemphasis on immigration, which Dr. Omazi raised, and also the issue that Professor Sogolo also mentioned, immigrants in Nigeria being given protection. They are not being given protection, like you asked, because we don't have an immigration policy. But at the same time, you have to put it in context, because Nigerians are not protected either from the law and from politicians, from anybody else. I mean, you can't give protection to others when you don't even give it to the basic rights of freedom or of expression or movement. We don't have that either for Nigerians. So we can't expect it for the state to be able to extend it to non or new immigrants, let's say, into Nigeria either, which is why in my presentation, I emphasize the importance of creating institutions and maintaining institutions, and deepening the influence of institutions is the only way you can both be able to create the conditions that will discourage emigration out of Nigeria, but also be able to give the opportunity for those who choose to immigrate to Nigeria, the opportunity to be productive members of that society. I also added lastly, in my presentation, the matter of having a more tolerant society. Our society is not tolerant. It is not tolerant because the law enforcement agencies don't function, not because we don't have the laws. The laws, everybody has the freedom on paper. In practice, it doesn't exist because the law enforcement doesn't work. So reinforcing institutional power is very important, and keeping to the law, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for that wonderful round-up. I mean, making very solid comments about those points raised. Thank you so much. And now, let's go to Professor Tijani.
Thank you very much. I would like to quickly make my intervention response, and I will start from the last two, Professor Akinwale and Professor Kala. I think the center should make available a copy of that policy document. But on pages 47 through to 94, we have principles of non-discrimination outlined in that policy document. Again, is an effort to put to paper this idyllic way of mitigating the challenges without understanding the problematic, as we've stated before. So the area of review, in my opinion, and based on the comments of Professor Akinwale and Professor Kala, should also focus on this, and I hope that the communique will emphasize that. Now, let me respond to Professor Emeritus Sogolo, and I decided to write it down so that I don't miss anything. My comment about exclusionist policy has to do with the failure, I repeat, the failure of the set objectives and strategies. And of course, the other panelists have also identified this, failure. My comment is not about the United States, neither did I mention the US, and I never compared with the US. My presentation is the reality given narratives that we can relate with, and which each and every one of us will have our different storylines. The reality of the failure of the policy document. Lastly, since the two speakers before me emphasized outward, situation, I decided to concentrate on internal situation, despite the fact that my PowerPoint is inclusive of what they have talked about, and that is why I skipped some of the slides. So the exclusionist policy is a failure of the policy that we are interrogating. It has nothing to do with trying to implant the US model. In fact, that is another discussion that could take another 2, 3, 4 hours, because in their case, they have a pathway to residency, pathway to citizenship. Of course, that is not our purpose here. And as such, it is not part of what my own intervention is about. I thank each and every one of you for joining and listening. God bless and Godspeed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof, for that wonderful roundup. We are very grateful to all the three speakers because they've done justice. I want to say, particularly on my own part, what are my own comments? I want to say, I seem to go with Dr. Mazu, that Nigeria needs to work hard on things to attract people to come in, even if such a policy comes in place to say it's addressing immigrants. especially into our country, then we must fight the needful from home front. The corruption, the banditry, Boko Haram, all those things must be taken care of to make the country a place where people would want to come into to settle down. But with those threats around, I really want to wonder whether we have much to boast of today. Then, of course, I really enjoyed the part that Dr. Madi talked about the discriminatory policy. In other words, if you are a woman, you married a Nigerian, you can be well accommodated. And if you are a man, you married a woman in Nigeria, then you have a problem. This is discriminatory and it's not good enough for us. It's not good enough for the society that would want to attract people to come and settle down. And of course, the word of we don't have a tolerant society. Of course, that is very, very, very visible to all. This is not a debate. It is true that the society is not tolerant, and that we have discriminatory policies, which must be taken care of. And then, of course, she has rounded it all up. She said, we have no migration policy. And I think I absolutely agree with her. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm very, very happy that today has been. I've been expressing this since the last 2 months, that today we come for this wonderful topic, and I'm so happy how everyone has contributed. I don't think I can see any hand up again, so it looks like we are all happy. The justice has been done to this topic, and now what it is how to write this up and let those who should know about it know about it. So we need everyone on this platform to help us to carry this to the place it should land, not only ending here on the surface of this our screens, but to get somewhere. So, and I know some of us here have the power and know the people that we can submit this to. We are open to advice. Our center link was submitted, and some of us are already on our platform, and those who are not there and are here, especially the presenter, I think it's only Dr. Madi that is not on our group, and I'm going to add her straight away to that platform. So we can continue discussion on our platform. We can advise, and everybody has my phone number. If we're not going to really talk about it on our platform because it can be very sensitive and maybe not very directional, at least you can advise me on the phone. The speakers have my phone number, many people have my phone number, and we can continue this discussion and see how we can carry some of the salient points here forward to where they will mean something. And my team, Dr. Nasi, Dr. Paraduru, and I will sit up and write up this communique and let it get to those who should receive them. So thank you very much. I really want to appreciate you, and I want to say it's been nice sitting here for this almost 3 hours, sitting here and listening to this in very, very, very exciting presentations. Thank you, and God bless you. We'll be reaching out to you outside here.
Thank you.
I think I would want to have so we'll get to know him more and talk more. Okay, so maybe now that I have this number, I will get in touch with you. Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Nancy. Thank you so much, Dr. Paraduru.
Thank you. Such a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.